Okay, you're live.
Good afternoon and welcome to the February 10th, 2021 Parks and Recreation Commission Luther Burbank Docks Subcommittee video meeting. My name is Peter Struck. I serve as Subcommittee Chair. In accordance with Proclamation 20-28.10 and the Governor's extended Safe Start Order, this afternoon's Parks and Recreation Subcommittee meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this evening. City staff Ryan Daly, Paul West, and consultant Andy Bennett are participating in this afternoon's meeting remotely. Other public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or via the internet. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones and will the city staff please call the roll?
Commissioner Struck,
Here.
Chair Westberg. Your microphone is off, Chair Westberg. There you go.
Here.
Great. And Commissioner Gualtieri.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Participants, before we start the business of this afternoon's meeting, I want to suggest a few rules to help the meeting to run smoothly. We are going to be less formal than in full commission meetings. Please step in to speak when you sense that the previous speaker has finished. I ask that everyone be observant and allow commissioners equal access to speak. You still may use the raised hand feature if you want to step into the conversation. Please mute your microphone if you do not anticipate speaking in the current discussion. Additionally, prior to speaking, please state your name for those listening in on the meeting. This afternoon's agenda will not include public appearances. However, individuals wishing to make comments on the subcommittee business today can use the comment feature on the Let's Talk project page or email Paul West, the project manager. This project is scheduled to be discussed at the Parks and Recreation Commission's regular meeting on March 4th, 2021, where there will be an opportunity for public appearance via Zoom. To preview the agenda for this afternoon, we're going to begin with a presentation by our consultant, Andy Bennett, on the draft preferred concept for the Luther Burbank dock renovation project. Then we'll have a discussion and potentially revisions of this preferred concept by the commissioners. Then next we'll have a status of the concept elements by Paul West, as well as an additional item regarding a pump out element that again, Paul West will describe. And finally, we'll end the meeting with next steps, and our placeholder, our next meeting is scheduled of the subcommittee on February 22nd. So with that being our agenda for the day, the first item is the discussion by Andy Bennett on the draft preferred concept that he has developed.
All right. Thank you, Peter. I'll share my screen, and a host needs to enable participant screen sharing for me.
You're on mute, Paul.
I'm making Andy a co-host.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, that looks better. Okay. So sharing my screen, and you should be able to see the alternative concept that had been sent a little earlier. And my intent on this is that I'm going to try to capture, there we go. try to capture your comments and the discussion on the screen here if I can. If it turns out that that's a little cumbersome, I'll take notes on the side and we'll send a revised plan um, after the meeting when I get a chance to clean it up. But basically, what I did is I took the discussion that we had earlier on the kickoff, and where we kind of heard your concerns and questions and comments on the three different alternatives that we had, and I tried to boil it down into some of the key elements and some of address the key issues that we discussed, and try to get kind of a single idea out there that we can add to, subtract from, tweak, whatever, but to start honing us in on a preferred alternative, and hopefully, we can do that fairly efficiently here. So obviously, the big graphic is about the docks. They're a little bit easier easier to see and a little bit bigger, so easier to draw. So that's kind of why they're here. And what I've done is, I think, having the two gangways and separating the powerboat float from the hand powered launch float, and kind of providing some separation there was important. We can see just in this configuration, we've got about 80 feet between the floats, and I put the finger floats for the small power boats out at the end to minimize, if anybody just wants those, they can just use the fingers there as opposed out here at the end, and try to keep this basin a little bit less busy for the small sailboats or kayaks or stand-up paddle boards or what have you that might be in this area. And the other thing is just added a little return on the other end, which provides better wave protection for the smaller boats that would be launched from the smaller float. On the smaller float, we're thinking about actually providing a little bit wider gangway. People coming up and down carrying stand-up paddle boards or kayaks on this gangway to be able to pass, you need a little bit more width, so I made it a little wider. And then knowing that this would serve different types of hand-powered craft, I broke it into a sort of a higher water freeboard section and a lower freeboard section, and provided a couple of fingers. One of the things we didn't really talk about explicitly at the last meeting, but what Paul and I have discussed is that the main waves are going to be coming in from the channel and coming ashore this way. And so having the boats perpendicular to the waves makes them a little bit easier to get in and out. If they're side to the waves, they definitely are going to roll more. So a few fingers makes it a little bit easier to get in and out without being affected by those waves. And a little higher freeboard here, or a little lower freeboard there, just to make it easier to accommodate really lower freeboard boats like rowing shells, and higher freeboard boats like a small sailboat. So that's kind of the idea there. And then on the plaza, we know that paving repairs have to happen, so that's throughout. The steps to the water was something that was really a concept that people seem to like, that got some good feedback, so we can talk about that some more. And then improving the access both from the accessible path that runs along the waterfront to the plaza, as well as making it accessible to get to the beach. So it's easier to launch kayaks or other vehicles from the beach, but we want to have that accessible path as well. And so those are some of the main elements to show in the plan view here and to capture our discussions. Some other things that were not as easy to capture at this scale, and just sort of more general things, is that, we're assuming that the boiler building will get reused. It'll get renovated and reused as more of an activity center. The idea of a rooftop outdoor classroom has a lot of support, but might be a different project, a separate project, depending on funding sources. And then in general, it sounded like we didn't really want a really ornate or, didn't want to do a lot more with the decorative elements of the plaza. It was more going to be functional, clean it up, make it a little bit nicer. If we want to add some things, we can do that later. But in terms of just planning, let's just make it better at what it is without changing it too much. So better lighting, some picnic tables, some better signage, things like that to clean it up and make it a more functional space. But, it didn't sound like there was a lot of support for gated entry, or not gated, but entry arches and other things that would really make it more of a destination in itself. And then on the beach, again, we want to have access to the beach, whether or not there's ADA access on the beach into the water, which would be, to be year round, it would be a concrete ramp, and there's some issues with that. So that's something we need to think about. And the main ADA non-powered boat launch would be from the docks. There's mats that we can use. There's other ways we could make the beach accessible to launch craft in the summer. So that's something we can talk about at the beach. And then there were some questions from the kickoff. Should the dock overwater coverage be maximized? Do we really need a lot of finger docks? Do we need any finger docks? Should we do more at the North Beach to make it wider and more accessible? Right now, it's relatively narrow. So we did a site visit, and one of the guys on my team launched his kayak from that beach in the wintertime. So it works, but should we make it a little bit better, more accessible? Should it have a ramp? And then questions about the role of lighting and the seating and the use of the boiler building. So those are kind of the takeaways in sort of graphical form, and some notes from our previous meeting. And so, now we can kind of get your reaction to those and see how close I came to actually to hearing what you thought you said. So we can kind of, I guess, start with start in the water and what additional thoughts or comments do you have on that piece?
Well, this is Commissioner Strzok. I can start with one question, Andy. So looking at the finger docks on the, I'll call it the small, or for the smaller boats. I guess in color here on the screen, on the schematic, is in green. So we have 4 finger docks shown.
Right.
What is I'll say just the pros and cons of why not 8? I mean, or what? Maybe I'll just say more. Is there, from a kind of a design or engineering perspective, is there any reason why we couldn't have more? I'm not advocating for it. I'm just trying to understand.
It takes away from the length of these other things. This concept does maximize the overwater coverage. You can see in the note, I think we're only leaving 5 square feet on the table.
Okay.
At this level, that's pretty rough. If we wanted more, then we'd be giving up some length on some of the other docks. And it becomes a few more elements, so it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's not, a square foot of finger dock is not a huge amount more than a square foot of other docks. You do have some connection details, so it's a little bit more complicated, but overwater coverage is your main trade-off.
Okay, so just so I understand. So again, looking at the dock for the, I guess, non-powered craft primarily. So the section toward the end there that does not have any finger docks, there, I presume the boats, I guess, potentially on either side would basically just tie up kind of parallel to the dock.
Yes.
Okay.
And the same on the lighter green section here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's all I needed on that. I'll let somebody else talk.
I had a question about the finger docks too. Actually, Peter, I thought you were about to ask just kind of general pros and cons as to, do we need any? So, I mean, I guess I I understand that you could actually get more boats in because now they're not parallel to the main dock, but like, what is the main purpose of the finger docks? So that, and also so the boats don't hit each other? Or I don't know, if you could just kind of give us a quick pros and cons of the finger docks, that would help.
Yeah, the biggest advantage is that they allow you to get into your boat when it's perpendicular to the predominant waves coming in, and so they don't roll as much when you're getting in and out due to the waves coming in, because they're perpendicular to the waves. So the waves tend to pass under them, and maybe the bow goes up a little bit, but they don't roll sideways. So a little bit, that makes it a lot easier to get in and out. And it does give you, because they're narrower, you could have more capacity for mooring or launching boats this way if that's where you want it to go. If you have a wider main dock, but then narrower finger docks, and the finger docks don't have to be as long as the kayak. They can be, if the kayak is 17, 18 feet long and the finger dock is 12, 14 feet long, you can still get into the kayak. And so it can be a little bit more efficient use of the overwater coverage.
This is Commissioner Westberg. Are we using the raise hand thing or just chiming in since there's only 3 of us?
Just chiming in.
Okay. So Andy, I had a couple of questions, 2 related. One related to finger docks, and that is, generally, can finger docks be used from both sides? Is that the idea? That you could launch from either side of a finger dock? So
yeah, so I'll zoom in on that, since that's what we're talking about. So on this one in particular, that's nominally 1 kayak width here. And the reason for that is, for ADA access, you kind of need to have access from both sides of a kayak to get into it and to kind of stabilize it. But for the rest of them, you would have 1 kayak here and 1 kayak here. And so you could have a kayak on each side and be able to get in when it's a low freeboard. There are places where the finger docks are close together, so you have one on either side. For kayaking, that's particularly great because you can put your paddle across the docks, and you've got something that's really stable to get into and out of the kayak. But it's not necessary. So typically you would probably see something like this where you could, 2 fingers would give you access for 4 kayaks.
So the in this drawing, then the 2 that are closest together, that was done intentionally to show that would be an ADA
Yes.
compliant launch point. Okay.
Yeah.
And is that the same idea with the finger docks for motorized craft, that you can use them from both sides, or they would be spaced to allow use from both sides?
Yeah, they would definitely be, these would be sized so that on these 2 finger docks, you would have room for 4 small power boats. Okay.
And then the gangway out to the motorized dock at 6 feet wide, is that, I just had a question as to whether or not that would allow for 2-way foot traffic. Is that wide enough to accommodate that, or is that, were we stuck with that just because of overwater coverage?
No, that's wide enough for 2-way foot traffic. It's not wide enough for 2 wheelchairs to pass each other, but that's not a design criteria, even for ADA facilities. And we actually have used that for, I've seen it occasionally on small passenger ferry terminals where you're getting a higher volume of people than you would here. The other one is a little wider, but that's because people are going to be carrying bigger things up and down.
Yeah. And is the assumption that there would be cleats along the length of the the dock for small.
I don't know.
motorized
I don't
boats?
know if we would use cleats or just a continuous tie rail.
Or a rail, okay, but
Yeah.
there would be some there would be some
Yes.
way to tie off boats along that whole 270 foot length, or
Yep.
even, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Even on the return here, that's 25 feet. You could
put a
conceivably
boat
have
there.
a couple boats there if you
Yeah.
had a flotilla come in all at once.
And this is kind of unrelated to docks, but related to the issue of overwater coverage. Would the stairway count against that overwater coverage number? Or is that a totally different issue?
That would definitely factor into the permitting. It is overwater coverage, and it's actually would be on the bottom, so you're actually disturbing existing habitat,
Mm-hmm.
which is the lake bed, and so something like that, ramps your permitting requirements up a little bit more. And I've not included that in the overwater coverage calculation at the bottom of the figure here. That calculation is just for the floating docks.
Okay.
The steps to the water is one, it increases your permitting risk, and two, it could be, a bit more that, and just general construction would add considerable cost to the project.
Okay.
But
And
if it was attractive.
so it's kind of standalone then with regard to the issue of overwater coverage. We treat it as a totally separate element.
We would go in, it would be all part of the same permit package if we wanted to go that way, and the agencies want to see everything in one package. They don't like piecemeal packages.
Mhm.
But if the intent were to build that, then we would have to do more mitigation work to, offset the impacts of that particular piece of construction.
Okay. And then just the final question that I had is that in some of the options we looked at earlier, the dock was more squared out from the existing north dock. Is the shape that is shown in this revised option, is that optimal from the standpoint of wave attenuation?
It gets quite a bit better, and that the thinking is that the whole thing would be essentially the same cross section, so it all acts as a wave break.
Mhm.
Or breakwater, and the returns on the end really help a lot with protecting the float on the inside from the waves coming in from the wake surfing boats, which is the driver.
Yeah. Great, thank you very much. That was very useful.
This is Commissioner Struck again. And I know when we get to the elements criteria page, this question kind of comes up again. So, we might do double duty here, but hopefully the next time will be real quick. But I guess I don't have a I think, again, kind of thinking demand and supply. So we're talking here about the supply of boat slips and kind of moorage availability and so forth. I guess I would make two statements, and maybe Paul, you'd be the best to kind of say yay or nay on them. One, I assume that this proposed configuration for the two docks would increase the moorage for the various types of boat, the non-powered as well as the powered. That would be one from current. And then secondly, I guess and I don't know if we have the answers, but okay, it's increased, but is that enough, or should we try to do more? To me, it looks fine, but I just throw that out there if there's any thoughts from Paul, from information you've gathered.
Paul West here. It's a hard question to answer because we don't really know how much demand there will be if we have docks that actually function well for the craft that want to use them. The majority of the visitors that come to these docks are small motorboats but they're tying up at a suboptimal facility, and so they tend to not stay very long, or go elsewhere. Yes, this is more than what we have right now in terms of at least if you count all the finger dock tie-up points. Let's assume that the tall main piers are just not realistic in the summer for tying up to, but that the small finger piers are what we're counting. Yes, this would provide more moorage for small motorboats than what we currently have. Not by a lot, but maybe by a factor of 50%. Of course, it's there's no capacity right now for non-powered boats, except, well, no, there's the 10 by 50 float that's out there right now. So there is a 16-inch tall float out there right now. It was put in for the sailing program, that could be used, albeit with difficulty, by kayakers and canoeists and small sailboats. It's really intended for small sailboats, but I guess other people could tie up to it. So that provides basically 50, or if you want to count both sides, that's 100 linear feet of moorage for small boats, without any cleats of any kind to tie off to. So very difficult to say what's going to happen when you actually have places that kayaks can realistically use, when small sailboats can actually find cleats to tie up to. I think we're going to have to see, but we've gotten very clear indication from at least one or more permitting agencies that there's no way we're going to get more overwater coverage than what we've already got. That's asking for more overwater coverage than what we got is dead on arrival. So I think the trade-off is really, if you're like Andy was saying, if you're going to go for more finger piers, then you're going to shorten a dock somewhere else, and you're going to be kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, trying to get more finger docks in here.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think that that was very helpful. That again, you kind of, from the overwater coverage, you kind of have a ceiling or constraint there, and then it's just a matter of moving the pieces around a little bit. And I think as Andy said at the outset, that if you put in more finger decks, you kind of just shrink that whole footprint, if you will, and that creates some more congestion. And I kind of wrote down kind of potentially safety issues, I guess. So I guess we'll talk about it on the next one to kind of finalize it. But the way I look at it now, it looks fine.
And I want to say that I don't think that overwater coverage limit applies to the steps. We haven't really discussed that with permitting agencies, and they might look at that differently than docks. I know just docks in general are considered really problematic for fish habitat. So I think that's where the sensitivity to the dock overwater coverage comes in.
Yeah, and I think for the steps, we'd want to look at somewhere where we could do some mitigation. Because that water is kind of, that part of the lake is recessed in there, it's against a bulkhead, it's between the 2 little overlook areas. It's not high quality habitat, but no. It still is in water work, and so there's we would need to come up with a strategy to pursue, to show a mitigation strategy on that element.
Okay. Any other general or specific questions kind of on the docks themselves and the kind of boating capacity issues?
Yes, Peter, I have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
This is Commissioner Gualtieri. So about the ADA sort of finger dock there, I thought we heard, was it at the last meeting, or Paul, was it at that meeting in the summer where we had all these stakeholder groups? talking about how ADA, people from ADA boating programs said, you know, it's actually easier to do that on a beach and not, it's like very difficult to load people into boats from a dock, especially in that situation. Is that so? And then I wasn't sure, also kind of related to that, I don't know, Andy, if you could zoom out in your notes, you said something about the 8 on the left, it said something about ADA docks. What, yeah, boat launch from ADA docks. Are you talking about this, what we're talking about right here, this little finger dock, or what's the quote ADA dock?
Yeah, this would be, you know, we would configure this area specifically to accommodate an ADA kayak launch here. There's a couple of different versions on the market, and we would, you know, try to build one of those, or, you know, come up with our own, but incorporate an ADA kayak launch here.
But didn't we, I mean, Paul, do you remember this discussion? Was it in the summer or was it at the last meeting? Didn't the ADA people say we'd actually rather launch from a beach than a dock? It's kind of complicated to get someone in a kayak. I mean, I would rather launch my kayak from a beach rather than a dock too, but.
So I actually had Tim Nagel from Outdoors for All down at the docks during the open house, and we looked at all of this together. And basically, the answer is that different people with different types of disabilities need different things. And the paraplegic wheelchair user who's actually has strong upper body and coordination, which is Tim, and also like Rory Calhoun from RCO, like to launch from docks into a kayak from their wheelchair. But Outdoors for All uses or serves a wide range of abilities, you know, people with many different kinds of disabilities, and for a lot of those people, launching from a beach is easier. But I think, but Tim's conclusion to this consideration was that they're used to launching from beaches and kayaks. They know how to do that. What they don't have usually at a site is the launch from the dock. So he was saying, you know, if you're going to put ADA into this project, focus on the dock. Being able to give us access to the beach, we can work with whatever is at the beach once we get there with our clients. So, and I think that that's reflected here, that we're focusing on the ADA being on the docks, not on the beach necessarily.
But I think we do, you know, the intent is to improve it, provide an accessible path that goes from the waterfront path here onto the plaza. The grades there just don't work right now, but also make it accessible to get to the beach. And if you can get to the beach, then you have the beach, and you conceivably should be able to launch from the beach if that's your preference for launching the boats. Right now, there's logs and things there, and it's really not easy to get to the beach. So making that improvement would provide you know, that option, and hopefully that would give the site some flexibility.
This is Commissioner Struck. So Andy, with respect to the accessible path to Cobble Beach, when I was down there last week, kind of just looking down that beach, and you're right, it is maybe a little bit narrow, but you know, it does have a very currently a very naturalistic setting, if you will. So the question I have is this accessible path, what materials, or what would it be envisioned? I mean, is it a cement slab, or what would it be?
I think it would be, you know, depending on the grades there, it might have to be some cement to get there. You know, the path that's there now is not a cement path. It's
Right.
a hard gravel path. And so that's the surface that's considered accessible. And to the extent possible, we'd want a similar surface to that. The cobbles on the beach are such that I don't think that kind of stone really works. So we'd want to do something that's a little bit more solid, um, to make that connection and help people get onto the beach.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. I think it's necessary. My only comment would be it would be just to try to make it as less intrusive or as natural as possible, if that's the right term. Again, kind of thinking of, well, you can put a big sidewalk in there that kind of doesn't really fit within the narrative of that beach, but then you've got like something else that would be maybe be better. And again, there's a balance there, but at the end of the day, you have to have the access. So
Right. I think
This is Commissioner Westberg. Just to follow up on that point that Peter was making is the path, I assume, would be above the high water level for the lake.
yes, we
Since
would
the level
try to,
does fluctuate at all times. So would it be possible to use some kind of I don't know, some kind of a disaggregated granite or something like that in there that might be contained within borders, like wood borders or something like that, to make it blend in, as opposed to concrete?
yeah, I think the material there would be, ideally we'd be able to get away with something like that does fit in better with what's there now. And I think we can do that. We'll have to look at the grades and
Yeah.
also, how we would anchor, if we are going to try to frame it in, can we anchor those frames in such a way that it would contain that?
Right.
That's certainly an option that we'd be looking at.
And this is Commissioner Struck again. So under the beach elements, the comment was made, potentially using rollable mats to provide summer water access. I assume that's along this path or beach here.
And that's also to get actually into the water.
Okay.
So if we had access to the top of the beach,
Uh-huh.
there are mats that you would be able to roll out that, someone in a wheelchair could roll down the beach, I guess, to get into a kayak from there. And I know in one of our alternatives, we showed a concrete ramp going all the way down to the lower low water level, and that was going to have a big impact. So the access that provided could be provided by one of these rollable mats instead.
So I kind of have a visual of it now, but would those be these rollable mats? Essentially, are they quasi-permanent year-round, or is it something that you would only use during the summer months?
It would just be used during the summer months.
Okay.
And we'd have to take a look at them to see if it's something that could be left out, or if it would be something that would be deployed in the morning and taken up in the evening.
Oh, okay.
So it is a lighter weight material that, and some of them are. So, that's what we look at to provide that summer access.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And this is Commissioner Westberg. Those mats would mainly serve to allow a wheelchair to roll over the cobble, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't have to be a permanent installation like a concrete ramp.
Yes.
Which I thought was a great alternative.
Another question that's on the page under kickoff here, regarding the beach, should it be widened? And I think we may have talked about that last time too, but any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think if it were widened, we'd probably have to do some kind of retaining wall against the back of it to maintain that shallow grade, because you do have that fairly steep slope coming down. But that work would be above ordinary high water, so it's more manageable.
This is Commissioner Westberg, and we were talking about the widening, I think, in the context of creating a more space for youth programs and kayaking classes and things like that. And I was actually just down there the other day too, walking around and looking it over. And I was wondering, how much room there is to widen the beach, and would it jeopardize any of the tree plantings along that area if we did that? You know, why cut back into that slope, put a retaining wall? Are we going to lose any trees?
Yeah, I'd have to look at exactly where the trees are. We try to do that to minimize any of the trees. I think most of the trees are further back, closer to the path.
Right.
But there are some that are along the water, and we would minimize that impact as much as we could if we did want to widen the beach.
I can answer that also. This is Paul West. In the area, so the ramp would extend along the parallel to the beach, and I imagine the wider beach would be starting somewhere about where the arrow points to, the saying kayak launch from Cobble Beach. Currently, there's two smaller trees on that bank. They're both root suckers from the surrounding Lombardy poplars, and the trees are maybe 20 feet tall and maybe 4 to 6 inches in diameter. They're not large trees, and they're volunteer trees that are really they're not in great conditions. So I have to say that yes, there's two trees that would have to come out if that's the area we're talking about. But they're not the large Lombardy poplars that you see along the rest of the shoreline, and they're not in great shape.
Okay. So, okay, well, we'll I guess when we get to the next page, we'll kind of have a vote on this, but that's good. Just looking again down these lists of elements, are there any other kind of more, I would call it just really more questions about either what is in the schematic specifically, or did you think about this kind of thing?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Westberg. I had a couple of things that the kind of questions and comments, so I'll just shoot. So with regard to the rooftop classroom on the flat portion of the building adjacent to the boiler building,
Yeah.
Is the current structure sufficient to support that type of use without doing a lot of rehab? Do you have any idea from the earlier boiler building study, Paul?
Yes, it is. The architect looked at the structure of the restrooms and determined that it supports the loads needed for a rooftop classroom.
Okay, and how would you get access up there, particularly ADA access?
The access would come on a ramp that would start, if you're looking at the draft preferred alternative, you see there's a line, the paving repair, the flag paving repairs, right where that line hits the bubble, there would be a ramp that starts roughly there, right at, kind of where the driveway comes down the hill and it meets the plaza. There'd be a ramp starting there, and it would go up at ADA grades to the backside of that classroom. And at some point it would hit the grade of the classroom, and then you walk out onto the classroom. And that ramp, in the big scheme of things, would continue north, behind the boiler building, provide access to the boiler building, and then continue north up to the parking lot. So that's the concept that, you know, fully realized would provide full ADA access to this, to all the elements of this site.
It would go all the way up, so it would cross the existing path that comes down steeply and reach
That's
a
right.
switchback or something, and then go back up to the.
Yeah, so it traverses across the slope, almost to the Luther Burbank Administration Building, and then it switches back to meet up with the covered walkway, and the existing steep driveway on the north side of the boiler building would be demolished and replaced with a set of steps that would meet that same pathway. So you could come partway down and then come down the steps, or you could continue on in a wheelchair, or, you know, just taking an easier grade on the continued ramp structure that goes behind the building.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Struck. Just staying on the classroom idea. Paul, could you maybe define when we say the term classroom? I mean, what would, if it was built, if you will, what would I see when I walked up there?
That's why we're here to some degree, but I think the idea is that we have classes and camps that we have run and we would like to continue to run at the boiler building, and Ryan can speak to this also. And there's always a classroom element to those camps and classes that we can't currently host in the boiler building. We don't have a certificate of occupancy for the boiler building to actually use it as a live occupied space. It can only be used as storage currently, and that's likely to continue until we do major renovations. So this outdoor classroom provides that space for, you know, the sailing or kayaking or whatever instruction that we want to give. And it could be, I don't really know, Brian, chairs, benches, a canopy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you summarized it really well, Paul. Ryan Daly. I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself, but yeah, I mean, from a recreation programmer standpoint, honestly, the opportunity is endless. It's the challenges we've had with the sailing program being hosted out of the boiler building, to Paul's point, is you can't gather in there. You're not allowed to learn your knot tying or learn your demonstration and whatnot, and that's what that outdoor classroom aspect would provide, as well as a separate gathering space. Right now, when a camp or a program is operating, they're gathering in that open plaza down there, and they're trying to get organized, and you're taking roll, you're doing all these different things. Being able to step into a separate, I don't want to say secluded, but separate area maintains that area, the plaza area, to be open for general park patrons. And that's been a little bit, I don't want to say a conflict, but a challenge in recent years, given the popularity of some of those boating programs. So the other side of that is it could be used for art programs or things like that, where you're providing that additional gathering space. So I'm probably leading a little bit here on the excitement that I have as a recreation programmer, but I do see a significant opportunity level there.
And just to clarify what Paul was saying, I found the study, and actually I can rotate this to zoom in and make it a little easier to see what we're talking about. But this is the path, would come in from this existing path. You'd have a landing at the height of the rooftop classroom, and then the path would continue over and do a couple switchbacks to come up here. So that's the previous study, but and then the existing path would be gone, but there would be some stairs coming down from an enhanced landing / plaza part way up.
Thank you, Andy. This is again Commissioner Struck. Just to kind of finish up my comment first, thanks for that. yeah, when I was down there last week, I looked at the rooftop there and just thought, wow, what a wonderful space. A little shabby right now, but the potential is just fantastic, I think. And so my strong suggestion would be and I think that we're on the kind of same page here, but is to kind of keep it as flexible as possible. So, maybe it's just a kind of a flat space with a railing around it or something for the appropriate safety measures and so forth. But then you could configure it, whether it's going to be an art class, a sailing class. Again, those classes primarily happen in the summer months. So then you get to the winter, you still have a lot of, pedestrians or park walkers coming down on a sunny day like yesterday. And if there was, picnic tables or some type of seating up there, the view up there is I think it would be fantastic. And then it has the added benefit that Ryan just mentioned regarding it moves a lot of the congestion, away from that plaza area. Because the one thing I noticed or just kind of felt that plaza area needs to be kept as open as possible, because again, I think most park users, either you're going to be coming from a boat off and walking into it, or you're just walking, through it, if you will, and maybe you stop to kind of, gaze across the water and whatever. But if there would be a lot of picnic tables and, other kinds of seating there, I just looked and it'd be too globbed together, to use a very non-technical term. And I think it would be not a great experience for either people sitting there trying to eat their lunch or things like that. What I thought about was, up on top of the hill there, we have a handful of picnic tables, but you could eat your lunch or have your picnic up there. And then if you wanted to have the family or whoever, come down to the water, ideally if the steps are there or the beach, they can do their wading or whatever they want to do. So it's kind of a win-win situation. So anyway, that's my thought on that. Any other kind of questions? And if not, we'll kind of, I think, move to the elements page that Paul provided, and we'll kind of revisit some of this stuff here, hopefully fairly quickly.
All right, I'll stop sharing and give it back to you, Paul.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk about, I did have a comment on the plaza and the paving, and I don't know whether we'll get to that when we talk about elements or.
Well, actually, why don't you just bring it up now? Because actually under plaza activation on the sheet, there is pavement. So I guess we can wait. Sorry about that. So why don't we move to the other attachment, which was the elements and status. And this is a document that Paul put together. And again, it has several, I'll call them criteria or elements. And then the second column is a status from the first meeting, where I think, again, Paul and others tried to conclude or summarize kind of where we landed, and then kind of where the status is in the prelim concept. And I think, I'm going to ask Paul to kind of walk through this, and so to make sure that on each one of the items, if he is needing to kind of move the process forward, if he's needing, more input or kind of a consensus, that we reach that. And again, I think some of these things we've probably discussed at length, so they'll go pretty quickly, and other ones that might be new. So Paul, I'll hand it over to you. You're on mute, Paul. Still on mute.
There we go.
There we go.
Everybody see the screen that I'm sharing? Yep, great. Okay, so I'm going to just go down the list. Overwater coverage. Currently, the preliminary concept has that maximized, but it was also noted as a question because at the last meeting, Commissioner Gualtieri spoke in favor of reducing overwater coverage. So this is the chance to find out if we have consensus on that.
I'm fine with where we are now.
Okay, great. So check. Breakwater width and effectiveness. The current concept has that segmented breakwater is shown. Do we have consensus on that?
Yeah.
Maybe I could you could just give a thumbs up if it's good. Okay. Great. The points of access. The choice was between 1 or 2. Commissioner Struck raised that last meeting. Currently, the preliminary concept shows 2 points of access. We have consensus on that. Great. I see 2. Great. 3 thumbs up. Okay. Small boat power capacity. So the current concept has the small boat moorage as on the breakwater plus the 2 finger piers, which provide 4 slips for power boats. I think we went over the finger dock, so I don't think the finger docks questions have been addressed. So do we have consensus on that small powerboat capacity? Yep, I see 3 thumbs up. Great. Non-powerboat capacity. We have the 130 linear feet at 2 different heights plus 4 finger docks. 2 of the finger docks are for ADA access. We answered those questions. We have consensus on that.
I think Paul, on that, we've 130 linear feet at just one side of the dock.
That's right.
So we actually have, if we take both sides of the 55-foot dock, that's 110 plus 75 to 185. We're well over 200 linear feet, excluding the area set aside for the finger dock. So, just to be clear that both sides are accessible for moorage.
Yeah, and I think the message is as depicted is accepted. We're going to skip fits within the program limits. I think maybe Andy and I will work a little bit on that question between now and the next meeting. Okay, so let's go to shoreline access, ADA access to the North Beach. That's the ramp is shown. We understand that it's desired to be as naturalistic as possible and still conform to ADA. We have consensus on that.
So this is Commissioner Struck, just so I'm clear. So from what my discussion from a few minutes ago, and I think on the diagram there is no ramp into the water, right?
There is no ramp into the water.
No fixed ramp, correct?
Mats
right.
Or something, right?
And we talked about the movable of mats. So yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think this is Commissioner Westberg. I think we have agreement on the idea of providing ADA access to the beach, and we still have questions about how that would be done in terms of the pathway and the materials and construction and all of that. But yes, definitely to the idea that we do that the project includes that.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Struck. Thank you, Roy, for that kind of clarification. Okay, Paul.
Okay, I've noted that those are elements to be determined. Non-powerboat landing and launching, the current proposal, the question about the width of the beach and ramping. So we've talked about that, the ramping being mats, but that's still to be determined. I think we need to discuss whether we widen the beach here.
And this is Commissioner Struck. And was the thought in terms of the widening, was it like 5 feet or something like that? Or was not a specific number specified?
And this, yeah, we didn't specify a number.
Okay.
I've got the alternative that showed a wider beach pulled up on my screen, and it did kind of push things back and soften the grade a little bit.
Should I stop screen sharing so we could look at that?
Yeah, I can just show you that detail from this drawing.
Great.
Uh,
'Cause I think it is really important to be in the details. This is why we're having this longer meeting.
So this is hopefully you guys, you're looking at the detail of the North Beach here. And this was alternative 3, which was throwing everything out there. And so you can ignore some of the stuff at the bottom, and we wouldn't do this ADA ramp to ordinary low water level. But the idea is we would make the beach wider back here and expand it. And so there'd be maybe some more of a rockery back here. And just we'd lose, as Paul said, we'd lose some trees and lose a little bit of greenery here. But that's what a wider beach might look like.
And I want to reiterate from the last meeting that at the high water, which is from middle of May to the middle of July, the current beach width is in the area where we're talking about widening it. Right now, the beach width is about 3 to 4 feet to the logs. So you cannot launch a kayak perpendicular to the beach. You can only launch at parallel or at a skew angle, and there's no staging area. So I think this is pretty critical for kayaking programs to have some extra width, and it could be as little as 5 feet, but 5 feet plus the 4 feet we have would give you 9, which is more than half of the kayak can be out of the water. That's probably enough.
And this is Commissioner Struck, and I think, Paul, you mentioned just a little bit ago, again, talking about this beach area, that many of the trees, all the trees that potentially would have to be eliminated or dug up in this beach expansion. They're not, I'm not sure what the right term, they're not great trees, if you will. I don't know, maybe that's the wrong, or maybe the other way to put it would be that, if we wanted, again, I think one of the principles that at least some people expressed was, no net loss of tree canopy and so forth like that, that there would be ways to kind of mitigate this issue or not.
I believe there would be. We would definitely want to plant trees for shoreline shading, whatever we do.
Okay.
And because currently right now there's not many trees in that area. There's just these 2 spindly poplar suckers. So I think that, yes, we can mitigate. That still means that we've lost canopy when we cut those 2 trees down, but we ultimately get more canopy over the long term because we've planted more of the rights tree for the rights place. And we don't really know yet. I think I might be getting ahead of myself because we really need to design this more before we know how many trees are impacted. So we may have to come back to the commission at some point and say, look, this is how many trees we now know are going to be impacted, and this is how we propose to mitigate that. So there may still be work to do there. I don't think we're going to get to the final answer in this concept plan.
So this is Commissioner Westberg. Just to clarify, the schematic that Andy is showing us, which was alternative 3, that not only widens but also lengthens the existing beach, does it not?
The beach actually currently is fairly long.
It's covered at high water.
It's covered at high water, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you go down there now, Peter, you were down there, and I mean, my sense is it extends a couple hundred feet from the plaza.
Yeah.
100 maybe. I was down there yesterday. I was trying to look at it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it is, but it's very narrow as you get toward the end.
Okay, yeah.
even at low water.
So
okay.
maybe if I could throw this idea out, because I just have a sense this is kind of a touch point for some, but I think I would prefer to, at this point, to try to design it in, kind of do the due diligence to kind of some of the questions that have just been raised and so forth. And then when we get a little bit further down in terms of the public engagement, let's see what people think, because I think we understand the benefits in terms of, like I was saying, in terms of youth activities and, and I think just that kind of a little bit, a bigger area for people to enjoy and so forth. But, let's just we can get the community's temperature on this one.
Mhm.
I have a question. This is Commissioner Gualtieri. Is the rockery wall for slope stability purposes, or both, or something else? So I was just thinking about the slope stability, removing those trees too.
Paul West here. The slope is not particularly steep in that location. And the slopes in general in this area, we have been found to be stable. They're a very dense lacustrine sediment. So I don't think it's a stability issue. Typically a rockery is used as an erosion control protection on a cut slope. And I think that's what we're talking about here. It's not so much to hold back the slope as to just prevent the slope from eroding over time. We have some very steep cut slopes behind the boiler building that have been stable for 100 years. That's even with the erosion that's happened. So I don't think it's but of course we would have a geotech look at this as part of design.
Okay.
So I'm going to reshare my screen. And so the where we landed is to proceed with design of this beach, but have more input on it. And I want to just clarify, by public input, is the Parks and Rec Commission the right forum for that public input? Commissioner Struck?
Well, I was, that could be one. I was actually thinking if there's going to be a, kind of town hall or community engagement, get their input as well. But I guess I think we would start with the full commission.
Okay. I'm asking that because I don't foresee another engagement process like we've done up till now. So
right. Well, then we'll just go with the full commission. Okay,
great. Okay, so we got to there. Oh, so everybody's cool with where we're at?
This is Commissioner Westberg. Yes, I'm cool with where we're at with that, but just to clarify where we go with that. So we bring it back to the full commission when we're presenting this preferred alternative, and then it would go to 30% design. It would be included in the 30% design, right?
Right, and at 30% design, Peter, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but at 30% design, we should know about tree impacts.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And then that 30% design is open to the public comment.
We're not going to run another public process. It would go through the Parks and Rec Commission.
Okay. All right. Just to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, great. Additional water access. This is now referring to a group of ideas, which is the bench on the beach. There's a concrete bench on the beach shown in one of the alternatives. The bulkhead, steps. Basically, those are the two things. So the current preferred alternative shows the bulkhead steps, but no bench on the beach. Got one thumbs up from Commissioner Struck. one thumbs up from, okay, we got 3 thumbs up. So we're just going with the bulkhead steps.
Well, this Commissioner Westberg. Yes, I would say that I would not be in favor of putting a concrete bench down on the beach, but you could do something different. You could, incorporate a bench into a large piece of driftwood or something like that to create a more natural presentation, but still provide a seating opportunity.
Yep. I think the logs will remain, but we could actually probably design it with a log or 2 that are meant for seating. Right.
Also, Paul, this is Commissioner Gualtieri. You were gonna get back to us about if those steps count as over water, or was there still a question about that though?
Yes, and so at 30% design, I think we'll know more about where we're at with them.
Yeah, 30% design, we'll know, we'll have a construction cost, and we will have also had some more discussions with the agencies responsible for permitting and the other people doing the permitting to develop a strategy and really understand what would be the I guess, programmatic costs of adding a stair element like that in enough detail to really know what doing that is going to mean, both from a direct cost perspective and if we've got to do some mitigation somewhere else. But at this point, they seem to be a popular enough element. They add enough value that they're worth taking to that point, I believe. I think that's what we're hearing.
Great. All right, let's go to plaza activation. And here we are now at the pavement issue, which Chair raised.
Rory had a comment.
Well, I did, and I'm not sure when you say here repair shown what that means.
Repair. So I'm just referring to the preferred alternative, which Andy presented, which just shows the plaza in a bubble saying that we do pavement repairs.
And
well,
what does that mean? Does that mean replacing the existing? Because what struck me when I was down there, I don't know why I hadn't noticed that before, but I hadn't, is that there's 4 different kinds of pavement surfaces in that plaza area. There's the old rectangular pavers, which are wearing out, that actually cover a minority of the area. There's a big slab of concrete that is cracked. And then there's asphalt that is up adjacent to the restroom building. And then the plaza, as you come down from the playground area, is actually covered with gravel. So there's 4 different types of paving surfaces that currently exist there. And it just seems to me like if we're looking at this project holistically, we would want to unify that to one type of paver to cover the whole area. It greatly improves the appearance as well as the functionality. And you'd have to look at whether it could be done and or how it could be done and what type of material, and whether you look for impervious, some sort of impervious material or whatever. But I wasn't quite sure whether repair included replacing what's there, or it was just kind of fixing up what's there, which is sort of a mess.
I think we would probably, clean it up, and if it makes sense from the perspective of what the substrates can handle and how much the expense would be if we could do a uniform paving, we would certainly want to do that, depending on what's underneath there and how far we'd have to go down to put in a good substrate and some of the other details, that could affect what we do. But the intent there is to not really create a new amenity, but just make what's there, bring it back so it's got so that it looks good and has a a reasonable expected service life. So that's the intent. Is there a preference, or is there any thoughts on what type of paving would be preferred that we might want to consider and note in this?
This is Commissioner Struck. I don't really, I guess my principles would be, one, I would think about just from a maintenance standpoint, obviously less is more. So whatever that means in terms of various materials. Obviously, some areas are steep and by the water and so forth. Does that suggest, one type of pavement material versus another? And then, but I think Commissioner Westberg is spot on. I think that whether it all gets done immediately or not, but I think if we should have from this exercise have a plan of trying to get kind of as much as possible a uniform look. And again, maybe it doesn't all happen immediately, but at least the plan is there. And again, Commissioner Stark, and maybe this is one where it's a takeaway, and Andy and Paul, we come back at the next meeting. You've got some more thoughts about, what could be done, or give us a little bit. We kind of narrow the scope down from whatever unlimited to here's 2 or 3 of the most likely options we would suggest.
Yep. And we can do that. We can provide some alternatives for your review and consideration.
This is Commissioner Westberg. That would be great. I just have a question for Paul. There aren't enough of the old pavers left, are there, to redo the whole plaza area?
You cannot get the old pavers, and we don't have enough. Actually, that's why we have that gravel area on the north end, because we had to salvage pavers from there to repair the Hanson bollards.
Yeah.
We put the gravel down because we knew we would be redoing that plaza at some point, and we didn't want to redo it now, not knowing what the big picture was. So that gravel is just a temporary surfacing until we have this plan in place.
Right. So just simply reusing what was there is not an option. We've got to come up with
you can't do that.
New approach. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to come back on the 22nd with pavement options. Individual seating is the next, and at the last meeting, the comment seating should be included, but not extensively or detract from the open character. So I think that was a reference to having lots of picnic tables in the main plaza area. And then in the current preferred alternative, there's a question about the role of seating. So this is, and we may not get an exact number, but if we could hear from commissioners about, picnic table versus benches, or what's the mix of those two things, that would be helpful. Maybe we could come back with a proposal on the 22nd if we hear from you about that more specifically now.
This is Commissioner Struck. I have a comment, but I prefer to, if either Rory or Lynn have one, I'll wait. Not, I'll spout off.
Well, this is Commissioner Westberg. I think we reacted particularly to the alternative 2 that had the space pretty well jammed up with picnic tables, like eight or nine of them or something like that. I think a combination of a couple of picnic tables and a couple of benches that wouldn't necessarily interfere with traffic flow, but provide a place for people to sit down and maybe have a picnic or something like that would be desirable as part of the overall plan. but not overdo it.
Lynn, do you have any thoughts?
I agree. I guess I would have to see it on the diagram, but like 2 picnic tables and 1 bench or something, but I'm not sure exactly how that would fit, but I pretty much agree with what Rory said.
Okay, this is Commissioner Stark. I guess I go along with everybody. The key thing for me is I would want the seating, whatever configuration it would be, that it is not permanent. So, so we could, if you want to put 10 things down there to start with and find out that's a disaster, then we could, you could move 10 things away, or you could say, you know what, during the summertime, there's a lot more people there. We can't have very many, but, come, September 1st or September 30th, we could add a couple more kinds of things. So you remain flexible. The only area that I saw that I would vote for kind of a permanent kind of picnic table, kind of like kind of at the very north end of the Luther Burbank, that beach area that they redid a couple of years ago. I'm not sure what they call it. But they have up there they have a couple of permanent tables and seating arrangements. The only area I could see is if you look back at the preferred concept that was presented earlier, if you kind of walk off of the docks, right when you get to the land, right to the left, there's kind of right now you can see there's trees there. And so when I was down there, I could envision kind of, it's a little bit off the side, kind of out of the way. I could see putting a permanent setting of some type there, but everything else I walked around and I said, I would maintain total flexibility on this one.
Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move along here to interpretive signage. It seemed pretty clear that interpretive signage was not desirable in the last meeting, so there's nothing mentioned about it in the current preferred alternative. Is that where we want to be?
This is Commissioner Gualtieri. Are we just keeping what's there? Isn't there something about watersheds right there?
That watershed sign is just temporary. So there's no commitment to keeping that right now. We pay every couple of years for a sign like that there as part of our NPDES permitting, but that I guess I will say that the kiosk feature, the rusty metal octagon that we call the mushroom is not particularly loved by staff. So I don't, unless somebody here has a particular attachment to it, we would just be happy to see it go away, and a useful kiosk, because we do actually have a need for boating information there, especially if we're going to have an attractive boating facility to talk about, like, pump out and, fish closures and what happens if you have an accident. And, we have one sign out on the docks for all that stuff right now, and doesn't really cover the range of information that is at a boat launch. If you go to the boat launch under I-90, you'll see there's a lot more information available to powerboat users.
Well, this is Commissioner Westberg, so I'm a little confused about this one. So that really falls more under the informative signage, is what you're talking about?
Yes.
Because I don't have a problem with interpretive signage. It just, I think we reacted to the fact that we didn't want it stuck out sort of in the middle, some there, or obscuring a view out from the plaza or something like that. And I'm not actually sure what kind of interpretive information you were thinking of, whether it's about the boiler building, whether it's about the lake and environmental information. because those exist in other parts of the park. So
Right.
I think if you did anything interpretive relative to the boiler building or something like that, it should be on the boiler building or somewhere out of the way of the traffic flow, and ditto informative signage that would probably be necessary just from a user safety and user information point of view.
This is Commissioner Struck. I would concur with Commissioner Westberg's thoughts there, that to the extent that they're, we can use the sides of buildings for, to put up signs, boiler building, whatever. On the information piece there, they may need to be a little bit more visible, especially like you talked about regarding the docks and so forth. But I think the point would be is to, I like the term kind of de-emphasize or make them non-intrusive.
Okay.
Is it possible, this is Commissioner Gualtieri, is it possible in terms of, I agree with all that Peter and Rory said, but just maybe like one interpretive sign or one educational panel about the origin of Lake Washington. I mean, I'm a geologist, so I always talk to my students about that. I don't know, maybe we could brainstorm about if we did have one little educational panel, what would it be? I know out at Calkins Point, they have something about how restoration of a shoreline. I think that's useful. It's not in the way, but it's educational. So I don't know, Peter and Rory, what do you think about one little educational sign, and then the content of that we can talk about later? Or do you think that's not necessary? Or Rory, you were saying sort of see that in other parts of the park.
Well, no, I'm fine with having educational material there. It's just how it's placed, and I didn't really have a sense of whether there was any subject in mind or whatever, but I'm always for education. So if
a little bit, maybe a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and I like what they've done at Calkins Point, because it explains the work that was done there to restore and stabilize that shoreline. And why it was done the way it was done, just given that location. I think it's that's valuable information to have. I just don't have a sense of what we would put there at this point, but and where we would put it. But wherever it does, it should be not smack dab in the middle of the traffic flow.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Struck. I would agree with those additional comments that I think the key is just to make sure that they're kind of not intrusive. I could see, for example, on the pathways, away from the plaza area, either to the left or the right, by the side of the trail, if you will, you could put up a little sign, kind of like they have at Calkins Landing or Calkins Point, excuse me, and things like that. So yeah, but I think. Hopefully, we have a good understanding of kind of, it's okay, but let's make sure that we do it tastefully, I guess is the best way to put it.
Okay, great. So I think I've captured that in my notes, that there is consensus to have some interpretive, maybe one interpretive sign located unobtrusively that's sensitive to the rest of the site. And we can show that conceptually. Maybe it may not be shown as a location on the preferred alternative. It may be shown just as a note that the location to be determined at a later date, because it's going to be hard to locate that possibly, unless you want the certainty of locating it now. I think it may be better to make it as a note.
That's fine.
Okay, great. All right. So, and I think we talked somewhat already about informative signage. I heard some positive regard for that, but I imagine it's the same concern, is that if it shouldn't be right in the middle of traffic, it should be sensitive to the context. It should blend. I mean, I assume that most of the same comments apply to that. Is that true? Yep. Okay, great.
I've got a quick question. I'm gonna grab this screen again if I can, Paul.
Yeah, sure. Let me stop.
So just to be clear, so there you're looking at the docks, and there's a park map. You know, is that in terms of just informational signage? Is that kind of the scale, and it's out of the pathway, but right there when you want to look at it? So does this use of an informational sign, is this kind of what you would like to see, or is there a reaction you have to this that we could make it better?
Mrs. Commissioner Westberg, I don't have a problem with that type
Okay.
of display. I assume that's placed there for people arriving by boat to orient them to the larger park.
Yeah, I think this sign probably exists. Paul, does this exist in other places in the park as well? And then it's just
Yes.
somewhere there's an arrow here that says you are here.
Yes.
So, you know, I think there's a lot of value in being consistent.
Right. So it's wayfinding,
Yeah,
basically.
with the wayfinding. But okay, I just had, when I was flipping through other pictures looking for something else, I saw this one, so I just wanted to put it up and get a reaction. So thank you.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Struck. I would agree with that, kind of the way that one was. Well, I guess what I wouldn't want to see is, you know, on that wall just to the left, you know, 3 more of them, for example. I think that might be a little overkill kind of thing.
Got it.
All right. Exterior lighting. At the last meeting, we made it clear that lighting is only intended on the plaza, not on the docks, and we want to avoid casting into the water. In the current preferred alternative, it says there's a note to improve lighting but avoid glare on the water. I think my interpretation is that we have alternatives 1 and 2, the original alternatives 1 and 2 had either the same amount of lighting as is currently there, which is 2 light posts plus 3 sconces on the building. I think alternative 2 had slightly more, had more sconces on the building, but yeah, it wasn't extra poles that was shown in alternative 3. I'm assuming that this exterior lighting element is to keep something like what we have now or a slight upgrade. Is that a correct interpretation?
I guess the question on lighting that I have is, you know, if we light the plaza such that it's useful after dark, then are we also providing lighting that goes up the paths to, you know, to get to the parking, and what is the after dark, you know, how's the rest of the park functioning once the sun goes down? And how does that influence what we do with lighting on the plaza?
Paul, is the current lighting in place for security more than anything?
I don't know the answer to that. Ryan, do you want to say anything about that?
I would just chime in and say the lighting in the park is extremely limited and minimal right now, and I do believe that was for a reason. You know, we're not necessarily looking to activate that park in the evenings. When we do, we generally bring in temporary lighting or something along those lines. My feeling would be in the dock area or the plaza area, you know, it would be for safety for those who do maybe venture down to the water to understand that there is water right once you walk off the dock. But that's sort of the extent of the input that I might be able to provide.
The one programmatic function is that if we have fall sailing programs like we've discussed, is lighting could help with, you know, the programs would certainly have to end by dusk, but the people running the programs have work to do after the program ends, putting stuff away and putting the site to bed. And so the lighting could help with that. That's the only reason to have area lighting for programs down there that I can think of.
And I have two other quick questions. This is Commissioner Westberg. One is, would the existing light pole in the plaza area then be removed? Because there is a pole, or would that remain?
That, I think the intention is, at least for that, there's a pole in the plaza area right by the bulkhead next to the Hanson bollards. And then there's another pole at the north end by the northeast corner of the boiler building. So there's two poles. They're both on the bulkhead. They light that passageway between the building and the water, because that is fairly narrow.
Right.
It used to be narrower when we had a bench in there, and we wanted to make sure people understood where the edge of the plaza was.
Yeah, okay, so those would remain, or
Yes.
this might be replaced with something more attractive or something more up to date.
Well, yeah, upgraded. I mean, they're both LEDs right now, so they're pretty energy efficient. But yeah, there may be need to upgrade them at some point.
Yeah, well, they don't look bad, and then the other question I had was, if we put in the steps to the lake, for safety reasons, would we have to have some sort of flush lighting or something like that along those steps that would come on at night?
That's a landscape architect question, maybe.
Yeah, I think you know, the general lighting that you have now, or an upgrade to what we have, would probably be enough. I don't know that we need to run lights along the steps. It may be, you know, there would be probably some tactile strips or some other things, more from an ADA, you know, somebody, you know, tapping, although they're going to tap on the top of the step and see there's a drop off there. But if there's no intent to provide lighting for, let's just say, active programming after dusk, and it's really there as safety, and as you said, Paul, for, you know, program staff to be cleaning things up, I don't think there would be a need for specific lighting on the stairs. I think the area lighting would be adequate to let people see what's going on there.
Okay, thanks.
So this is Commissioner Strzok, just a couple of comments. I think my strong preference is to have, you know, I think maybe to echo Ryan Daly's comment about the overall park is, you know, is as little lighting as possible, obviously for safety reasons. I would think that, you know, I'm not really a big fan of the poles, if those could be removed. And again, there's things on the building and so forth, or that you could have, you know, poles that are like, you know, much shorter kind of thing. I think that would be my preference. I think, again, to the comment about, well, certain programs perhaps run after dusk and the staff needs to be around and so forth, and you need some light there. I would take a page from what the school district does on their fields, is they have timers, or that, you know, so you can say, you know, tonight I need the lights on till 9 o'clock. Okay. And then it just automatically pops off, or something like that. So you wouldn't have to say, you know, they got to be on all the time type of thing.
Right.
So But thank you.
I'm not sure. This is Paul West. I'm just not sure where we are. I thank you, Commissioner Struck. I understand that concern, but so it sounds like you would like the same level of lighting we currently have, but maybe reconfigured. Is that shared by the other commissioners? See one thumbs up. See two thumbs up. Okay, so
Yeah, and I think on that comment section, you could say that, you know, lighting for safety purposes only, not for programmatic use.
okay,
I think as long as it's clear that there's no intention to program the site after dusk,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and
Right.
that gives us the guidance we need to put together something that works.
I'm going to do a time check. It's 4:43. We're pretty close to the bottom of the list, but we also have another 10-minute topic after this. Do we want to push through and try to wrap up, or do we want to take a break? Short break?
Short break.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Yeah, so I have 4:43 on my screen. So at let's call it 4:50. We'll reconvene promptly at 4:50.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, a reminder to turn your screens off.
Okay, this is Commissioner Struck again. I think we have reassembled. It's 4:50. Paul, you want to continue down the list? I think we're getting towards the end.
Yep, we're doing great. Now let me share my screen. All right, so we've done exterior lighting. We're down to decorative elements, which was in the last meeting. The desire was to de-emphasize decorative elements. I think was fairly clear, and there was nothing said about it in the preferred alternative that we're looking at today. Anything need to change there?
I think I'm good. Commissioner Struck.
Says Commissioner Gualtieri, where does the discussion of the handsome bollards come in?
That will be next, public art.
Okay, I'll wait then.
Okay. So I'm going to take that as we're good on decorative elements. We're going to keep it simple. Public art, we didn't discuss that at the last meeting, and the preferred alternative says nothing about it. Of course, we have the handsome bollards there, and they were just renovated, so they're good for another 40 years as far as we know. And reminding the commissioners that there's an issue with the handsome bollards in that they don't currently provide the fall protection or the railing that code would require on that kind of drop off. One way to address that is to put in a railing, and the other way is to do something like the seating steps down into the water that would enable us to integrate the bollards with the edge of that plaza in a way that doesn't require a barrier.
Yeah, and if we don't do the stairs, but we are doing this other work on the plaza, including improving the paving, we will probably be required to put in some kind of code compliant handrail along there that would probably be just outboard of the handsome bollards. So they would stay, but we would have a code compliant element to protect that edge if we don't do a stair. But that's just a code compliance issue.
What are you looking for, Paul, in terms of feedback? I think thumbs up. What do you want?
I think, I think it would be good for the preferred concept to say something about the handsome bollards. And I think, there, and maybe it's a bifurcation that if the steps are included in the ultimate plan, that the handsome bollards are preserved in place. And then maybe the other alternative is if the steps are not included, that the handsome bollards be considered for relocation at some future date. I think it's going to be weird to have handsome bollards with the kind of railing that's going to be required, backing them up 2 feet away. It's just, I don't think it looks good. I think it detracts from the handsome bollards, and it is the kind of clutter that we're trying to avoid.
And I've got a question about the handsome bollards. Is the entire installation considered the artwork, or is it the fist on top of the post that's considered the artwork that we want to either preserve or relocate or whatever? And the reason I ask that is, if it were possible to put those on top of a code compliant rail, then we wouldn't have that visual clutter, but we would keep them where they are. But if the whole thing with the chains and the posts, if that is the art, then working around it just becomes a lot more difficult.
What I understand, this is Paul West, from working with Sarah Bluvis and the Arts Council, is that the art piece is the hands and possibly the chain. I'm not sure what how the chain is involved. The hands for sure, and that the posts are the mounting. So they're like the pedestal for a piece of artwork. They're pretty integral. I mean, you know, it's like if you had those hands on the top of a wall, they wouldn't be handsome bollards. They would be handsome wall or something like that. You know,
True.
so mounting the hands on some kind of post seems like it's part of the artwork conceptually. But the actual art is the hands.
Okay.
Well, this is Commissioner Westberg. I'm okay, Paul, with the way you laid it out, that we, that somehow indicate that if the steps are built, the bollards would stay, there'd be a public art piece. And if that is not an option that's ultimately chosen, that because of the need to put a handrail in there, that we'd consider relocating, working with the Arts Council to consider relocating the bollards to some other location in the park. Does that work for the other commissioners?
I got two. Oh, you got it.
I was just going to say, this is Commissioner Gualtieri, just that very last part of what you said, Rory. I mean, I agree, like not a totally other part of the park though, right? That's somewhere around there, that waterfront is, or.
Yeah, I had no idea. Just,
okay. But I think that your point of let's work with the Arts Commission, like they'll have some ideas and options, I think. But I think they should stay in that general area. But I mean, not right there on the plaza, but that part of the park, not somewhere far away.
Great, thank you. Okay, viewing decks and viewpoints. And I'm not even clear about what that is. Because and that's not the outdoor classroom, and it's not the steps to the water. Maybe it's semicircular. I'm sorry.
I think it's just the sort of overlook elements of the plaza.
Okay.
And I think, you know, we kind of discussed those in terms of, you know, maybe the one on the south side, which is a little bit out of the traffic path, might be a good place for a fixed picnic table or something else there. I think the northern one is more of just a place to just stand there at the bottom of the stairs and enjoy the view. But I don't know if maybe there's some other programming that could be done with those. But there aren't really decks other than the outdoor classroom, which is the next item.
Yeah. Let's unless commissioners have a perspective on this, I would like to just skip it for now and try to discern what it was that meant. And bring it back to the 22nd meeting.
This is Commissioner Struck. I mean, that's fine, Paul, although I would agree with kind of Andy's synopsis there of kind of the two bookends to the steps area. So, but we'll see what comes up next meeting.
Okay, and then outdoor classroom, I think we had positive response to showing that. So I think that stays in, yep, I see the thumbs up there. Okay, great, thank you. Great. And then landscaping is not discussed at the last meeting. I would like to share a different screen here, because I just want to make sure we understand what's down there. I know that you've visited this in the past, recent past, but I think this is worth talking about, because there's a real issue there with the trees. Here's the picture of the existing location. These trees were planted in 1974 when the plaza was built, and they're the roots seem to be very constrained, and there are actually not a lot of roots under the plaza. They're mostly just constrained into the planting pits, and so they've mounded up in this configuration that you see. And the other problem is, you can see in this first picture, is that the plaza around the trees has settled, or maybe the trees have raised the plaza. Anyway, there's low spots that are poorly drained now and are collecting water and dirt. And then the tree condition is actually, two of the trees are not in bad shape. One of them, the one that's closest to the dock entry, is in fairly poor shape. It's got a lot of dead wood, and it's not growing very well. And there is some root heave in the plaza pavement. Here's a root that's heaving the brick edge band. I just wanted to point these things out because do we really want to preserve these trees for the next 40 years? Will these trees live for the next 40 years? Is there something else? And are these trees in the right location for the next 40 years? They're fairly close together, and they crowd that area to the south of the docks. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll also say this element of landscaping also does include some planters that were shown in one of the alternatives. And another one of the alternatives showed new trees in more of formal planting, I believe.
This is Commissioner Stark. Kind of my initial thoughts are, I mean, since this renovation and project is kind of, looking over the next 30 to 40 years kind of thing, to your point, Paul, if those existing trees, for example, probably are just going to have more problems going forward than not, then I think, coming up with an alternative makes a lot of sense. On one hand, having a kind of a tree canopy of some type for the shade in the summertime is good, but again, there's not a lot of area there, so I'm not sure that that's a great response or answer, but I guess I'm open to alternatives.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Westberg. I'd agree with that. I don't think we should go to great lengths to preserve those trees in their current relatively unhealthy state. And we could mitigate their loss or their removal by providing plantings in other parts of the park where it would be more appropriate. So. It's hard to think of shade this time of year.
This is Commissioner Gualtieri. If there's at least one good one, maybe we could keep that, but I think shade down there would be good. But is there some process?
Can you say that again?
Oh, I just said, if there's one good one, maybe we could, that's worth preserving, maybe we could. And I like the idea of shade down there provided by the trees. And then I just had a question, is there some process that we need to go through with the city or the Parks Department, or is this it? If you're gonna remove trees from a park, I mean, I know people are gonna get all upset about that. You have to, what's the process to justify that?
We will have to do a tree permit for this project, and there will probably be a mitigation of tree planting for, these are small trees on the scale of that, so they won't require like lots of trees to be planted, but you know, that is part of the permitting process.
Well, this is Commissioner Struck again. I think kind of to the picture you showed, Paul, about the, kind of the quality of the pavement and the sinking and so forth. I think probably that goes back to the conversation we had a bit ago about pavement and kind of where we're going to end up with that. And I think that's probably part and parcel of the overall picture.
Okay. So I actually, that I think we'll come back to the 22nd meeting with a proposal about this. It's tied that, because I think we're going to also come back about the pavement at that meeting. So we'll also look at the trees in conjunction with the pavement. And then other landscaping planters, or there used to be flower baskets on the boiler building, which we could show in this plan, or that could just be an operational decision. But if that's a desire, if we show it in the plan, then it's something we're more likely to do.
Well, it's always nice to be able to, this Commissioner Westberg, always nice to be able to soften up those hard surfaces. I certainly would support the continued use of seasonal flower planters and that kind of thing. Not ones that would be set into the pavement or whatever we're gonna, but on the hanging planters on the buildings, that kind of thing. And I don't know if you need to call those out, fine. That's my take.
This is Commissioner Struck. I concur with Rory. That's fine. I kind of view it more kind of an operational probably issue, but if you want to include it, that's fine.
Okay, great. Got that? All right, and let's see, let me look at my screen. We're getting close to the end here. We have not discussed the concession stand. So that was a note that I put in about last meeting. We have not discussed, and that I know that was a popular issue during the open house. As you all know, there is a concession stand that is currently used for storage next to the restrooms. Our current certificate of occupancy allows us to use it as a concession stand. And the concept of having a rental program would be that concession stand would be the retail interface for that rental program. In other words, there'd be a cash register, a desk and chair in there or something like that, that people would, the window would be used for people to transact their rental agreements there. So that's the concept. If the concession stand, I think the issue is specifically around food and whether there's food there. Again, that could be an operational issue. I don't think there's any proposal to create a new facility for food or provide anything that's an upgrade to an existing facility for food. So does the commissioners want to have a discussion about that for the concept plan?
This is Commissioner Westberg. I think what you just laid out is, I mean, using the space as it relates to the a a boating operation or whatever, then that it makes sense. And, you know, it seems to me it's an operational issue if you include in that the ability to sell packaged food to program participants or whatever. By that, I mean, like, you know, bars, chips, whatever, but not turn it into a restaurant or a separate food concession.
So this is Commissioner Struck. I guess I think of the food issue, even kind of the chips and stuff. I think, well, first I would say that again, it's an operational, if my view would be is if the city wanted to find a private contractor that would want to come in and do that, and take that kind of financial risk, you know, and we just provide the building, you know, at cost or rent of something like that, that would be great. I just kind of see this as a non-starter. I think anything that would approach any kind of restaurant type of thing or whatever, I think you'd have huge community backlash from that. So I think that's just a non-starter. You know, the one alternative would be to, you know, put a food truck, you know, or if you could get a food truck to come down there. Again, I think most business people, when they look at that, they'd say, yeah, there's probably, I don't know, 10 or 20 days a year where you'd probably make money. I think, you know, maybe 30 days, but, you know, 9 months, 10 months out of the year, you know, you wouldn't have anything. So it's, I'm just not sure that it'd be a lot of work, and I'm not sure how much, you know, value there is. And if people understand there's no food there, you know, they bring their own.
I'm all for, this is Commissioner Gualtieri, I'm all for the little chips and bottled, well, I don't know about bottled water, but anyway, if, you know, whatever the organization, you know, very minimal, whatever the organization wants to do. I don't know, I think the community would be pretty split on this, but I'm not sure. I think it's a pretty big topic, and I'm not sure where we want to head in that direction.
I mean, I think that it's okay for the concept plan to be silent on this.
I mean, I just think, you know, people with little kids at that playground. I mean, I remember when my son was little and you're stuck there with, you know, your Tupperware of carrots and whatever. I would have loved to have had you know, and you thought you were going to be at the playground for half an hour, right? And here you are 2 hours later, like it would be convenient. But I think like Peter, you said, I think people can just plan, and you don't generally expect a large food offering at a park. So, you know, I think it's okay, but a little bit of chips and bars in the summer. And I like the idea of a taco truck or some kind of a food truck once in a while, if that would be allowed.
This is Commissioner Westberg. Yeah, the food truck idea would be okay, but the place to put it would be in the parking lot, not down by the water, because you have way more users up there. People going to the playground, people going to the tennis courts, people picnicking. You have way more people up top than you would have, you know, in and around the docks, except on a nice sunny day, maybe. But no, I think the point, I guess, that we would be signaling is no particular support for the idea of a separate food service operation in that space.
And I think when we put together our document that goes forward, it'll note that there's a concession stand here, and we're not going to do anything to improve it, upgrade it, whatever, but the rest of the programming would take advantage of the fact that you do have a space where you can conduct retail transactions. But we wouldn't be calling out any recommendations for investment in the space, I don't think. Clean it up, but note that it's there, and when you identify a vendor or go down a different path to figure out who's going to occupy it, there might be some minor tenant improvement kind of things that you would do, but for the purpose of our plan and securing funding, grant funding to make improvements to the plaza, to the docks, to the beach, we don't need to say much about the concession stand.
Yeah, well, that works for me, Commissioner Strong.
Great. All right. So we got through the list. Yay. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to now share another screen. Let's see. Where's my share screen? There it is. Okay, I'm going to do this again. But I'm going to switch to, when we were applying for the grant that is funding this plan, the panel that reviewed the grant suggested to us that we explore the idea of having a boat pump out facility at Luther Burbank docks. And we agreed to explore that as part of this grant. And so tonight I want to just ask for your time to look at the option that we have here, because there's some good reasons to do it and there's some reasons to not do it. And we need to have direction on which way to go from the subcommittee. So it's called the Clean Vessel Act program. It is designed to encourage people to pump out their sewage from their boat rather than dump it into the surrounding waters. And this is a very important thing for Lake Washington because it's a contained lake, and it wasn't that long ago that we had a very polluted situation in Lake Washington that has since been cleaned up by King County Metro. One of the good news is about this program is that we are considered part of the inland funding region, which is not as competitive as the coastal region. And the grant manager has indicated to me that if we wanted the grant funding for this, it's likely that we would be able to get it. Oops. So the Clean Vessel Act grant funds provide 75% of the funding for construction, renovation, operation and maintenance of pump out stations and dump stations and pump out boats. What we're talking about for the docks here is a pump out facility. And that would be something like this configuration where there's a pump container, and then there's a hose reel container of some sort, and then the plumbing and electrical to connect this back to the sewage pump that's in the waterfront plaza at the boiler building. It would involve running both plumbing and electrical out on the dock. We're definitely eligible to apply. They're trying to get more of these in place so that there's very little incentive to dump sewage rather than pump it out. And as I said before, the program pays for 75% of the costs. The other 25% could be covered by other grant programs. So it could ultimately be little cost to the city. In the situation of Lake Washington, there aren't a lot of choices for pumping out. In this diagram, you see there's 4 pump out sites on Lake Washington, plus this other one that's in gray, number 65. Up until last year, there was a concessionaire that was hired by Washington State Parks to provide a mobile pump out on Lake Washington. And this mobile pump out would travel to any boat that called or radioed them to pump them out where they were in their marina or tie-up. And it was very popular, and it probably handled the majority of the sewage on Lake Washington. And that mobile pump out program ended quite abruptly last year because of mismanagement of that by that vendor. and there is no vendor that has taken over that concession. And this is a great loss to Lake Washington. And so the program is kind of really trying to push for more pump outs on Lake Washington, including having a new vendor of the mobile pump out, but that hasn't happened yet. So here's the kind of the lowdown on this situation here for Luther Burbank. The pros are this would help keep sewage out of Lake Washington. It fills the vacuum left by the loss of the mobile pump out concession. The grant funding is reliable. Like I said, we could probably get it if we wanted it. It would mitigate the impact of power boating on Lake Washington. It could help fund the renovation of the existing sewage pumps at the waterfront. We have 2 pumps at the waterfront, and they're getting along in years, and this could help fund that as well, which is a good thing. And having a mobile pump out in our grant proposal could give us some incremental advantage in our grant application for construction of these docks. On the downside, there's the cost that this entails. There's a cost not only of constructing it, but of maintaining it. There's also a cost for designing it. Andy has a tiny amount of money to look at this in their overall picture, but there'd be a lot of extra design costs to get it to a place where we could actually construct it. We had a discussion about this a couple days ago, and we realized that this could be a problem to run in an unattended site. You know, we have the majority of our boat traffic on the weekends. That's when we have the lowest staffing level in the park. If there was a spill or the pump went out or something else happened, how would we respond to that? The electrical on the docks is an added maintenance, and it's also a risk. There, you know, when you have electricity near water, you have extra things to consider. And we know that people swim off the docks, and having electrical next to a place where people swim, even illegally, can be a problem. Would the pump out create additional transient boating traffic? We don't know. From the grant program standpoint, they would like to have these pump outs at high traffic areas like big marinas, big, places where boats tend to go. We're not talking about having 50 or 100 slips. We're talking about having, a dozen slips for power boats. And kayaks and canoes don't pump out. So it's only serving a small number of boats. It's probably not an ideal site for the program. It would occupy valuable dock space. And the last point is that the Newport Yacht Basin, which is just on the other side of the I-90 bridge, may be getting a pump out station through this Clean Vessel Act program. So if we get a pump station that's that close by, having one at our site may be redundant. So that is my presentation, and I would just like to hear your impressions of the option to have a pump out.
This is Commissioner Westbury. I'll go first. My first reaction was, just as you started to go into what it was and what it looked like and all that, is a much better spot for this is at the boat ramp. You get way more boating. You'll have way more boating traffic through there, both coming and going, particularly during the high season. It's out of the way of visitors and other, other water uses. I just think it would be a very poor addition to the dock project.
So this is Commissioner Struck. Quite frankly, I hadn't thought about the boat ramp, but that makes eminent more sense. I guess I don't think at the at the Luther Burbank docks, that is probably the best spot. I think that my other thought was, you know, if Mercer Island feels that it has some type of being on the water and all this good stuff, that there's some obligation we should have is, you know, then maybe we should, like we do with other things, is, you know, provide funding to another site and say, you know, we'll help you because, you know, there's a lot of, you know, boats that are, you know, moored around Mercer Island, something like that. But as far as this specific project, I would say no.
Yeah, I would say no also. Same as Rory, it seems like the boat launch, police, I always call it the police dock there. That makes a lot more sense. Even if Newport does get one, we have one on both sides. So, yep, thumbs down from me.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I just feel that we have fulfilled the request from the granting agency, and I will report back the results. Okay, so that concludes my 2 agenda items.
Okay, thank you, Paul. This is Commissioner Struck again. So just to wrap up, our next meeting will be on February 22nd at 3 p.m. And I just kind of for the good of the order, is there any final thoughts? Otherwise, the time is 5:26 and we will stand adjourned.
Great.
Thank you all. And as a reminder, participants, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Have a good evening and stay safe and healthy. Thank you all very much.